Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I don't know. Statistics are.
Seeing at 6 p.m., I'd like to call the August 19th, 2020 regular meeting of the Kenai City Council to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening, and if you are able, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Here.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Here.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Here.
Councilmember Navar,
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Here.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Here.
and Councilmember Petty is absent. Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get to agenda approval, council, I'd like to call your attention to a laydown you should have in front of you with requested revisions to the agenda packet. Action add to item D1, ordinance number 3127-2020, memo regarding postponement requested by the city clerk. And action add to item G11, response to Governor Dunleavy's local mitigation level recommendations. Ketchikan Gateway Borough Mitigation Plan and Dashboard. This is brought forward by City Manager, Pleasure Council, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with the requested revisions to the agenda and packet listed by the mayor and request unanimous consent.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I move for approval of the consent agenda and request unanimous consent.
Second.
Is there any member of the body that would like to make any amendments to the consent agenda? Seeing and hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to please read those items in the record, please.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Tonight on your consent agenda, you have approval of the regular meeting minutes from August 5th. You have bills to be ratified brought forth by administration, approval of those bills, approval of purchase orders over $15,000 brought forth by administration, approval for the non-objection to a renewal of the marijuana licenses for Red Run Cannabis Company and Red Run Cannabis Cultivators brought forth by the city clerk. Introduction of ordinance number 3155-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Airport Improvements Capital Project Fund and accepting a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration for Phase 1 construction of a new sand storage facility brought forth by administration with a public hearing on September 2nd. Introduction of ordinance number 3156-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Water and Sewer Special Revenue and Water and Sewer Improvements Capital Project Funds and awarding a construction agreement for improvements to the wasting activated sludge pumps at the wastewater treatment plant brought forth by administration with a public hearing on September 2nd. Introduction of ordinance 3157-2020, amending Kenai Municipal Code section 1.85.010, report of financial and business interests to allow for certification by municipal officers that a previously filed statement of disclosure remains accurate, and approving an alternate certification brought forth by Vice Mayor Malloy with a public hearing on September 2nd. Introduction of ordinance number 3158-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the COVID-19 CARES Act Recovery Fund and accepting a CARES Act grant passed through the Kenai Peninsula Borough, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on September 2nd. And introduction of ordinance number 3159-2020, accepting and appropriating a municipal arts and culture matching grant from the Rasmussen Foundation in the COVID-19 CARES Act Recovery Fund, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on September 2nd, and that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item on the consent agenda? Okay, very good. Yeah, just give me a heads up if we do get any logged in. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. It was unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection to unanimous consent for consent agenda approval? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. That brings us to scheduled public comments. We have none. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. We'll start with public hearing D1, ordinance number 3127-2020, repealing and replacing Kenai Municipal Code, Title VI, elections to provide clarity, process improvements, and increase voter accessibility through vote-by-mail elections. This was brought forward by Councilmember Peterkin. There is a clerk's note at the July 1st meeting. This item was postponed to the August 19th, 2020 council meeting. A motion to enact is on the floor. Seeing nobody here, I won't reopen for public comment. So we'll bring it right to the body. Councilmember Peterkin.
I'm glad to introduce ordinance number 3127-2020.
Yeah, we have ordinance. It's on the motion to enact is on the floor right now, so
Okay.
it is on the floor.
Yeah, I
But
think
we have substitute ordinance 3127-2020.
I mean, we kind of put it off waiting to see what the borough was gonna do, so.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Sure, we could move the substitute ordinance, amend it with the substitute ordinance, and then postpone, like the clerk does. Would you like to do that, Robert? Or,
That's fine with me. I apologize, I should have probably did a little more, didn't realize it was coming up.
Yeah, that's no problem, and just as, that's what I was wondering, if we want to go that route, is just move to the substitute and then postpone would be, but let's move the substitute first.
Okay.
We'll Vice Mayor Malloy.
sure, I move to amend ordinance number 3127-2020 with substitute ordinance number 3127-2020.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. There's any objection? Seeing none, we now have substitute ordinance number 3127-2020. So I guess with that, that's on the floor now, and this is your sponsored this ordinance, Councilmember Peterkin. If you wanted to do the opening salvo here, I know there's a memo from the clerk that gives us sort of a roadmap with regard to the referendum on the borough ballot, as far as postponing this till the 21st of October, but I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, I'm good with doing that, because I think that it's important for us to wait to see what the borough does before we make our decision.
Councilmember Naxton.
I move to postpone substitute ordinance 3127-2020 to our October 21st meeting.
Second.
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested regarding postponement of ordinance number 3127-2020 substitute. Seeing no objection, unanimous consent. Ordinance number 3127-2020 is now moved to our October 21st meeting. That brings us to item D2. Ordinance number 3150-2020, waiving Kenai Municipal Code 21.10.130, lease execution and approving a lease execution extension to May 31st, 2020 to Schilling Reynolds LLC for Lot 5, Block 1, FBO subdivision 2018 replat. This was brought forward by administration. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I move to enact ordinance 3150-2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3150-2020? Seeing and hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah. Is there someone from the administration that just speak on background to this as to why we're here, just for our radio audience, please?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. So as you recall, Schilling Reynolds earlier this year was approved for a lease for this property with the intent to build a hangar and space for Guardian flight. Normally, you're given 60 days to sign the lease once you're provided the lease. Because of the changing environment under COVID-19, they weren't able to make it under that initial 60 days, And I extended it as allowed under my authority for an additional 60 days. But when I did that initially, they let me know that, again, because of COVID, the execution of this lease within that 120 days wasn't going to happen. And they asked for an extension that only can be, it can only be approved by council for an additional 6 months, or actually it ended up slightly more than 6 months, to May 21st, I think it's May 21st, May 31st of 2021. So I extended it to the maximum that I could. Now council is being asked to extend it to the May 31st. They're still confident that they can enter the agreement with Guardian. Guardian said specifically that because of COVID, their number of responses decreased significantly, but they're anticipating that they will get back up to normal levels and will allow this lease to be executed by May 31st, and then they can begin construction on the hangar.
I'll also note that the Airport Commission recommended approval of this lease extension during their previous meeting. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question for the city manager. So is the execution of the lease kind of dependent on that they're uncertain whether they'll have a tenant for the hangar?
Mr. Ostrander.
And so they're,
I'm sorry.
and that has to do with the commitment of the financing?
Through the mayor, Vice Mayor Malloy, yes, there was some concern, I think, that they wouldn't have a tenant, and obviously they didn't want to begin construction on that if there was any question there. In discussions with Schillings, they still feel that it is going to happen. It's just that it's not going to happen as quickly as they had expected. So that was one of the largest drivers for them in asking for this extension.
Thank you. That seems reasonable to me. I appreciate the explanation.
Any further discussion on ordinance number 3150-2020? Councilmember Naxton.
I don't really have anything to add other than in the packet, there's a recommendation for an amendment. So I would move that we replace, in the final whereas, we replace July 9 with August 13 regarding the Airport Commission meeting. Request unanimous consent.
Second?
Thank you. Seconded, unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that amendment is approved. Is there any other further discussion on ordinance number 3150-2020 as amended? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet.
Yes?
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're on item D3, ordinance number 3151-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Terminal Improvements Capital Fund and authorizing an increase to the construction purchase order, Blazing Construction, brought forward by administration. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to enact ordinance 3151-2020.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3151-2020? Hearing seen none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council, deliberation? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, again, just for our constituents in Radioland, if we just have the 30,000-foot view, this is going to kind of wrap it up. Is that correct, City Manager? This is kind of our last pass, and we have all the sum of money involved in this here in this ordinance.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning, this is, the intent of this is that this will be the last change order that the council will see. There is one other possible change order that we might be seeing coming forward that wasn't anticipated when this was drafted, which is just typical of this project. There is a little bit of money left in that project account that we could utilize. So again, the intent was that this would be the final one. There may be one final change order. We're certainly hopeful that it's not a significant change order, but yeah, this is very, very close to the final that you'll see.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I see that all our change orders are quantified and well documented, and of course, they have to be looked at by FAA, and we're in good stead there. So thank you for staying on top of it in the most excellent fashion. Appreciate it.
Any further discussion on ordinance number 3151-2000?
I have a question.
Oh, Councilmember Peterkin.
Thanks. I know, and I'm not totally up to speed on this, but we were talking about if there's enough money, maybe getting a new boiler or something. Is that included in this?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Peterkin, yes, the new boilers are included in this. A couple of the actually the big components of this are the new boilers that weren't part of the original scope of work, but we felt that it made sense to get those when we had the ability for the FAA to pay for a large portion of those. In addition to that, the furniture, which was not included in the original scope of work, is also included in this, which again, the FAA is covering a significant portion of the furniture purchase as well. And those are both included in here.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think when I was first on council, I asked our city manager about water and sewer, and I didn't realize how long he'd go on about it. But I did happen to follow up on that, and it's something I wanted to mention, if you guys don't mind, is I was at the airport, and Mr. Curtin happened to be there as well, and I saw the new boiler we have in the boiler room, mechanical room. Most mechanical rooms are undersized, just the nature of it. Well, it had 2 boilers in there, and those big old massive things are gone, and now there's a cabinet. And you can walk around there, it's well lit, everything's marked, and it's like, so where's the boiler? And he opens the cabinet door, and I've never seen boilers like these, but there were 6 cylinders basically going in, and each one of them is an individual boiler in it, and each one of them has, I believe, 6 stages. So, you know, as something is calling for heat, this boiler this cylinder thing, I mean, there's all kinds of space around it. It starts to ramp up and winds up, basically meeting that demand, and then once it's maxed out, then the next one will kick in. And, you know, things like that are just going to save the airport a lot of money. Not having a boiler that is traditionally, like most of us have in our home, are either all on or all off, you know, just creating all that. And it was really neat to see. I think it's something new. It's new to me anyway, and I think it's something we can probably expect to see around the city too, according to Mr. Curtin on that. And I encouraged him, I said, gee, what would be really neat to know, since you know the numbers on those, just how much we might expect to save at the airport, you know, heating costs and whatnot. And I think there's another little boiler for hot water at the far end too, you know, the building, because it's so big. But I thought it was worth a few moments just to, you know, to see that. And I thought it was really pretty cool. And I'm really pleased that we got a mechanical room that's actually functional. and it's got such neat equipment in it too. So anyway.
Care to comment, Mr. Curtin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councilman Nexon. I appreciate the comments, and we're very excited about it. It is it's a very high-tech boiler. I actually put one in at the Borough Building White House about 3 years ago, actually right before I started here. We put the exact same boiler in, is functioning over there. And while I haven't seen the actual utility bills, I've heard from staff over there that it's actually cut their bills in half, is what I've been told by staff. So it'll be curious to see what we do here. We did add to the footprint of the building, so the building's a little bigger today than it was, so we did add some square footage. And we do have some other components that, like Henry mentioned, the hot water. We have a separate hot water system on the north end of the airport because the restrooms are so far away from that we put a little separate system in for that. But I think there's no question that it's going to save money. It does have like a 30-to-1 drawdown on that. So the huge benefit for that is, in the summer and shoulder seasons, that can really idle very, very low and only provide the bare minimum hot water that you need instead of, like you said, running full blast and burning all of that energy. So I think there's no question it's going to save money. Next I'm going to be looking and doing likely a similar system at Vintage Point for their boilers at that time when it comes up. We'll be working with the design engineers to do a similar setup over there. So you'll see more to come. So.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, just on that same note, I noticed in our packet there's progress review photos also from the airport, and and the displays that were put up on the wall, the murals are just outstanding. Just outstanding. It just brightens and freshens the whole thing up. And it kind of changes the emphasis of our airport too. You know, we used to have, you know, all oil field and you know, the fishing industry stuff, and it's still around, but we're trying to emphasize the idea that we have a new logo, and we're inviting visitors and people to approach us on that level also. And I can see that the rendition of your photos are encouraging, and I imagine some will wind up on our Facebook page. And just thank you for keeping us up to date on that. A picture's worth 1,000 words.
Any further discussion on ordinance number 3151-2020? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yes.
Councilmember Navar.
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet.
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're now on item D4, ordinance number 3152-2020, accepting and appropriating a project-ready mini grant from the Alaska State Library for implementing the Know Your Neighbor Kindness Kits project at the Kenai Community Library, brought forward by administration. Pleasure, Council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3152-2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3152-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. And I did ask, when I looked at this grant, I went online to see if I could pull up a sample of what the Know Your Neighbor Kindness Kits project, what it would look like. But apparently there's more than one Know Your Neighbor. I kind of waited around for a little bit, but I did ask the city manager if he could just sort of give us a little overview of the content of what we could expect.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel, and Library Director Katja Wolf is on as well if we need additional information from her. But the objective of this, the goal of the project is to, like it says in the memos, to diversify the collection, but also to provide these little kindness kits, which are fun educational kits that kids can get. And primarily what's in these kits is a toy and then a DVD or a book. And the books are all with themes about diversity, empathy, and kindness. So being kind to people regardless of the color of their skin, or anything that might make them different than you, about really emphasizing how you need to be kind and empathetic with everyone. So there's unique and interactive ways to introduce the children to that. So through these toys, it introduces them that. And then there's also books in these that if you are a child of color, then there's also books in the library that you can relate to. So there are books that that you can relate to because there are characters within that book that are the same nationality that you are, whatever it might be. So it's really about diversifying the collection, plus then also providing these kits for kids so that they can learn to basically be good people regardless of who they're interacting with.
Very good. Any comments from council regarding ordinance number 3152-2020? Councilmember Naxtet.
I just really appreciate those at the library getting a grant, getting these grants, this grant in particular. I think this is a great idea. It's wonderful, actually.
Thank you. Any further deliberation, comments from council? See none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah.
Councilmember Navar.
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet.
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yes.
Motion passes.
We're on item D5, council ordinance number 3153-2020, appropriating excess funds received from the issuance of general obligation refunding bonds, brought forward by administration. Pleasure, Council Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3153-2020.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3153-2020? Seeing none, I think I'll preempt Councilmember Glendenning and just ask if maybe you can have Mr. Eubank give us an overview, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, Mr. Eubank can give you the best summary of this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So, if you remember, we issued advance refunding bonds to basically refinance the library expansion bonds that have 10 years of life left. We were very successful in that refunding. I'm going to save about $10,000 a year for the next 10 years in debt payments as a result of that. But when they issue these bonds, typically they're issued at either a premium or a discount, and that's done by the underwriters. One of their major functions is to kind of determine the sweet spot in the market and the funding, and with the general idea of they like to cover the cost of issuance when they're doing that too. So when we issued those bonds, we only had outstanding principal of $1,190,000 and some change. Well, total proceeds were about $1.213 million. So we had about $18,000 of excess funds that can be used to pay the different fees and costs associated with the refunding. And then what is left, I'm proposing, we'll just use as to offset our debt service in FY21, reduce what we budgeted debt service, or we won't transfer as much over there for the debt service and we'll utilize the couple $1,000. But this is going to allow us, originally Mr. Bloom was generous enough and had the funds in his budget to budget for the bond council and such expenses, but this will allow us to pay those out of these proceeds rather than his budget. So.
Very good. Any questions from the council? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Not a question. Thank you. I appreciate the explanation, and I also, again, appreciate the work doing this and saving money, and I support reimbursing the legal department. Thanks.
Any further discussion from council? Councilmember Navarre.
Just real quick, so I don't, this is a one-time transfer. It won't be for the next, and in your memo or in the whereas, overall, over the 10 years, we're saving $122,000, but you won't be coming back to us to adjust that. That's just will be in the bond or at the end or however, okay. No problem, thanks.
Any further discussion on ordinance number 3153-2020? Seeing none, clerk, thank you, Mr. Eubank. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes,
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes,
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes,
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah.
Motion passes.
thank you. Council, we're on item D6, ordinance number 3154-2020, accepting and appropriating a grant from the National Marine Fisheries Service passed through the Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission, accepting and appropriating additional insurance proceeds, and awarding a contract for repair to the Kenai City Dock for damage caused by earthquakes in 2016 and 2018, and installation of cathodic protection system to prevent corrosion. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I move for approval of ordinance number 3154-2020.
I'll second that.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3154-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Councilmember Naxton.
just on the money end, I just want to point out that I think it's great that there's nothing out of pocket with the city here. It's insurance money and also that a grant that will pay for this, and it'll be good to have that dock safe and up and running.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I echo those sentiments. It's good that we have a significant capital investment that is going to be renewed and refurbished. And I think when it's known that this dock is up and ready for business, I think we'll get even more interest in our waterfront and the facility that it offers. And thanks for Public Works and our city manager, Paul, for facilitating this money and getting this project going.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Councilmember Knoxtet.
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're on item D7, resolution number 2020-68, declaring the 10-foot utility easement adjoining the southern boundary of Lot 4 Eventire subdivision plat KN 83-149, and the 10-foot utility easement excluding the west 10 feet adjoining the north boundary of Lot 5, and the 10-foot utility easement adjoining the north and east boundary of Lot 6 Eventire subdivision number 2, plat KN 86-75, granted on plat KN 83-1149 and plat KN 86-75, are not needed for a public purpose in consenting to their vacation. It's brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to adopt Resolution 2020-68.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2020-68? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council. Councilmember Naxton.
Just request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-68 is adopted. Brings us to item D8, resolution number 2020-69, authorizing the city manager to enter a design agreement with the Department of Army for the design of the Kenai Bluffs Bank Stabilization Project. This is brought forward by the administration. Pleasure of council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve resolution number 2020-69, requesting unanimous consent.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2020-69? Seeing none, bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection?
No
Councilmember
objection.
Glendenning.
Just
For Jim's,
Yeah, go.
yes, and from Radioland, we have the city manager, Paul Ostrander, will fill us in on the latest developments in our bluff erosion project. Here's Paul.
Mr. Ostrander, can you give us an overview of what this resolution means?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. Appreciate the introduction. So this is the PED design agreement, which there's a draft actually attached to this, which gives you an idea of what's included in that PED agreement. We've been talking about the PED agreement for, well, 3 years now. This is really a significant milestone, and this allows the actual design of the project to continue, or to begin, excuse me. As you can see in here, the PED agreement does specify that the city is responsible for 35% of the project, and the Corps will be responsible for 65%. As we also know, at this point, the city is funding the entire 100% of this project. But because the 65 and 35 is in here, if and when we get to construction of the project, the 65% portion that we included in this design portion will be reimbursed for us from federal funds during construction. So this authorizes me to sign this agreement once it's received, which I still have not received it. I anticipate it this week still, hopefully. This authorized me to sign that, and then the design of the bluff stabilization project can begin immediately after that. I will tell you that when we get to the actual design of this, I'm going to turn that portion of the project over to Scott Curtin. He'll be managing the project through design and through construction. All of the politics and policies that I've been working through over the last 3.5 years. Hopefully I'm almost done with that and we can actually start doing some work. Thank you.
Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. I think this is great. I guess based are you anticipating, I'd like to have a work session with the council and the administration on this, just to kind of bring us all up to speed again where everything's at and how the process goes and some of our questions that we've had as to the design, what options can there be put in, what not, so there isn't this surprise. In other words, some of my questions will be, you know, I know that there's, you know, some dredging requirement in the mouth, and whether that can be something that can be included or discussed as part of the project too, or if that makes any sense, but just so the public knows, because there's been some of those kind of issues and discussions. Also, to just make it clear to us as the design moves forward, exactly what the game plan is. You know, we've heard different rocks and where the rocks come from and what ones meet certain quality, that type of thing. I think that way you're bringing us along at the same time, and I think that's important, so we can answer the questions out there, because we are gonna go to the public and ask them for some additional dollars to complete this project, and so that's what I'd like to see before everything's done, and then you say, well, here it is, and say, well, what about this or that? So I'm hoping that before it gets too far down, that we're just brought up to speed as to exactly the process and what the thought is going forward.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Navarre. So I think that probably the most effective way to do that, and I like that idea, the most effective way to do that would be once we are actually into the design agreement itself, bringing the core project manager down here, hopefully to be able to speak to council and answer a lot of those questions. I will tell you that many of those questions he probably won't be able to answer at this point, but he'll be able to answer many of the questions that I may not be able to answer effectively. So there's a new project manager. His name is Richard Ostring, and he's been really proactive and responsive so far. And I'm hopeful that if I extended the invitation, that he'd come down and have a work session with council so you could get those questions answered.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrander. Councilmember Nexton.
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good idea. Of course, we ought to be moving on, but the snow's going to be flying soon. It's almost winter, especially when you look at it in terms of a project like getting started here. So I was wondering if it might be too early for us. I don't know what our confidence is, but it takes a little while to get the bid documents for a consultant together. And if we wait until it's signed, we'll be waiting until after September 1st or something like that, which, and if we can gain a couple of weeks just by getting some of that together, if we feel confident enough to kind of get something started, maybe your template's already kind of set up anyway, but not put it out or anything like that until then, but just be ready to be able to put it on the street for a consultant. Is that kind of something you're thinking about?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted. So the scope of work for the surveying has actually already been completed, and that was coordination between us and the Corps. So that part is done, which is good because you talk about limitations during the winter. Surveying, particularly when you have to get into the rivers, you're going to be limited somewhat to how late in the year you can do that. So that's ready to go. As we've talked about before, we did have the 221 MOU in place, which would have allowed us to start doing some of this stuff prior to the PED agreement. But that was when we thought that the PED agreement wasn't going to be completed until November. Now that it looks like it'll be completed September 1st or first week of September, it really didn't make sense to go forward with that because there was, although I think very low risk, there was some element of risk with proceeding under the 221 MOU. In other words, if we took some sort of misstep that someone within the Corps decided wasn't relevant to this project and shouldn't be reimbursed by the feds, we could be responsible for that. So it's much more preferable to go into the PED agreement because what happens as soon as we sign this PED agreement, Scott meets with the Corps of Engineer group and they put together that scope of work, and then they immediately go out to get that consultant on board. So it's a long-winded way of saying we do have some stuff prepared already. I'm not sure that there's a feasible way under the PED to get that out prior to the normal schedule that we'd see under the PED agreement.
Just to kind of piggyback on what Councilmember Naxon was talking, do you anticipate any geotech work for the, prior to the pad, or is that incorporated in the scope of the pad?
Mayor Gabriel, there is geotechnical work that's gonna be required, I think rather extensive in certain parts of the project. That's not included in the scope of work that we have for the surveying, that would be separate from that. But I do know that the Corps has the capability of putting that geotechnical scope of work together relatively quickly. So that will be a part of some of those initial discussions after the agreement is signed.
Okay, very good, thank you. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I like your revelation. I like the idea that we're hand in glove with the Corps. And I like Councilor Navar's ideas that we would have timely progress review meetings, not only for our own information, but for the public too. And I think that's a system we can work out in time. And thank you for thinking this through.
Councilmember Navar.
Thank you. Back to this resolution, just so I understand it correctly and for the public too, but this money, you say the city's paying for, but we are using the state grant monies that we still received. And those grants have to be used on this bluff erosion project. So essentially we are risking, but we're risking the grant funds that were already appropriated. If for some reason this whole thing went sideways, which it's not going to, because we've come too far, but if it did, we're not on, I mean, we're using the funds that it can only be used for the project, correct?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Navar, that is correct. It is state grant funds. And I should be clear, when I said that there was risk involved, the primary risk I was referencing was the risk if we were to use the 221 method. At this point, if we get the PED agreement signed, we won't be using that method at all. So that risk goes away with the PED agreement. Now, there is risk that if this thing went completely sideways, we never went to construction, then that money would essentially be wasted. But it is the state grant funds that we're still using that we received back, I think, in 2012.
Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-69? Seeing none, unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-69 is adopted. Thanks, everybody, for your continued work on that. Next, we have item F1, ordinance number 3128-2020, amending Kenai Municipal Code, section 1.85.040, records public to provide for record retention length, brought forward by the city clerk. There's a clerk's note at the July 1st meeting. This item was postponed to August 19, 2020 council meeting. A motion to enact is on the floor. I would just like to point out that, or ask the clerk, there was a memo from our previous packet dated June 25th that asked that we move this along with the companion ordinance 3127-2020. Is that still your hope? Yes. Okay, very good. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to postpone ordinance number 3128-2020 to the October 21st, 2020 meeting.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, ordinance number 3128-2020 is moved to the October 21st meeting. And that brings us to G9. Action approval, 6-month extension request from SOAR International Ministries Incorporated for lease application expiration for the undeveloped portion of Track Day General Aviation Apron Number 2, brought forward by administration. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of the 6-month extension request from SOAR.
Second. And request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? See none, the 6-month extension request from SOAR International Ministries is adopted, or is approved rather, sorry. That brings us to item G10, discussion response to COVID-19. This is a placeholder we've been carrying forward on all of our agendas, so at this point I'll turn it over to Ms. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I have a relatively short COVID report for tonight. Just to update you on the case counts over the last 14 days. We've had 63 cases on the Central Peninsula over the last 14 days, which is an average of 4.5 cases per day. The last update that I provided you on August 5th, during that period from the previous council meeting, we were at 2.5 cases per day. So we have increased from 2.5 cases per day to 4.5 cases per day over that time period. That 2.5 cases per day on the Central Peninsula equates to a case rate, which is the number of cases per 100,000, equates to a case rate of 12.1 per day. The governor's guidance and the school district guidance both states that anything over a case rate of 10 would put you in the red, which is why we are now in the red for the school district. As far as facility operations in the city, no changes since last meeting. I would bring your attention to Ordinance 3158-2020, which was introduced tonight, which increases estimated revenues and appropriations in the COVID-19 CARES Act Recovery Fund and accepting a CARES Act grant passed through the Kenai Peninsula Borough. That ordinance will appropriate the funds that the borough is going to provide to the city through the form of a subrecipient agreement. It also, by the time we hear this on September 2nd, administration will have a recommendation for which buckets or which departments the funds should go into. Along with that, we hope to, by September 2nd, have the explanation of the programs that we're proposing there for your consideration as well. So we've been working hard on that. We had a lengthy meeting this week, and we'll be having another one next week to discuss where we think the most appropriate locations for those monies are. With that, that's all I have for COVID. The next discussion actually relates to COVID-19 as well.
Any questions, City Manager? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, City Manager. Also, for that meeting, would it be possible for us to get a report on the programs, the status of the programs that we already did, like an update of that spreadsheet on the grant recipients that we received a few, and how the other programs are doing? That would be good to know for September 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I have a question.
Oh, Councilmember Peter, your mic's still on there.
Thanks. Yeah, Paul, I was curious on that 12 per 100,000 or the four people per week or whatever. Is that, in that count, is any of that, is that people that are residents, or is that count like people visiting here and stuff?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Peterkin, that is residents only.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, how many of those wound up in the hospital?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Mr. Glendenning, as far as I know, there's been 0 hospitalizations over the last 2 weeks, and there hasn't been a hospitalization that I'm aware of since, well, for quite some time in the Central Peninsula.
And that was essentially the goal for flattening the curve, is not to overwhelm our hospital system. Is that right?
Mr. Ostrander.
As I understand it, yes, that was.
As we all kind of understand it. Thank you.
Any other questions of the city manager regarding COVID-19 response? Councilmember next then.
If it's appropriate, I wanted to talk about, and it's associated with the COVID-19 and our meetings, the commissions and committees and whatnot, and how that's going. And I just kind of wanted to relay a little bit, not get into great detail. I did talk to a few commissioners about a meeting, and actually 3, and they all had a different perspective of the meeting. or understanding and things like that. Two of them were Zooming in, and they didn't know who was in the room. One didn't get a lay down, and it's just part of the difficulties that we're all having. But the fact that they didn't know who was in the room and some of the other things associated with it, since they can't see, they don't know that there's social distancing necessarily being provided. One did tell me that he'd come to the meetings if everybody's wearing a mask. He has to do that where he works, and it was just kind of a matter of kind of coordinating that. I know there's one that I know also from another commission. He does not come in out of convenience. It's just convenient to zoom in, and I get that, but I think that the council operates more effectively, and anybody else would too. Being here, we're all making eye contact and all of that. We're having our distance here. Still, we got to be, sensitive to others, because I don't know what their situation is. And I had talked to Jamie somewhat about this, and I think she had some ideas perhaps on things that she could communicate with the commissions regarding their meetings and how they, it would be good to be here, how to separate folks, like we're doing, and just encourage them to be coming in person if they feel comfortable, and perhaps have a meeting amongst themselves, just how they would like to conduct that meeting. If they all want to have a mask, if they feel more comfortable with that. But I'm just kind of bringing it up for general discussion. And Jamie, did I miss something? That you had several ideas when we talked on the phone the other day, and I don't know if I probably omitted a few.
Ms. Hines, you want to jump in?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'm certainly happy to send out an email to the commissions and ask them if, after having participated in a couple of meetings, if they have any suggestions or advice for things that would be more helpful to them participating in Zoom. I do know that I could work with the chairs either to allow us as the clerks who are attending all the meetings to do a little bit of communicating with those on Zoom to let them know what is happening in the building. I know in the past we've had 2 planning and zoning commissioners in the room and everybody else on Zoom, and so I told them that we were going to have to rely on them in Zoom to make the motions because there was only 2 of them here. So we can certainly do some of that stuff as well.
But Jamie, we talked about that, or somebody had mentioned, the possibility of having a camera. We've got that camera and making that work so that they can see that. And it seemed like that was problematic for some reason, to be able to see who's in the room.
So
for those that are
the
Zooming.
camera that we have, we can check with IT to see if it's possible for it to be connected. It is already connected to YouTube for the streaming. I don't know that it can be connected to both at the same time. And that camera, when you watch YouTube, it only gets as far back as that first row of chairs that Terry's in. And so, because we have staff and other participating towards the back, they wouldn't be able to see, they can't see Paul, they can't see me, they can't see anybody in the back row. So they're still not seeing everybody in the room. And in a situation where Soldotna is they are having their local boundary commission, and Shelley shared with me that somebody from Dillingham called in and spoke against their annexation to the local boundary commission, just because it's so much more accessible. That may or may not, that would likely wouldn't have come to the meeting if it was in person. So if it's costly to bring these things online, and then what would the expectation be moving forward? Would we be setting a precedent that we're allowing the online participation moving forward forevermore? Those types of things. If we did do that, I would hope to have some sideboards set up so that we knew when an end date might be.
Yeah,
Councilman Gondang.
Yeah, just an idea. participated, listened in, or looked in on other Zoom meetings, and what I found is, there would be like the roll call, who is here and all of that, and just for those who are in Zoom land or don't have, view of the room, perhaps just identification of those who are here who could testify or illuminate the subject at hand, members of the staff or special providers of information, and that might help expand the understanding of the participants as to who is available to answer their questions rather than just being focused on a certain small portion of the room. It'd be just an interesting technique to think about anyway. Thank you.
I guess I presume that they're looking at what we're looking at here, right? At planning and zoning?
Correct.
So
So
could
if-
you type in the staff available, like instead of saying council chambers, it would, and it's like we see Miss Wolf's online here. You could just add those names to that.
I don't, as instead of council chambers?
Or in addition to council chambers, I don't know if you have enough space when you type those in.
I don't know how much space there is. I could look into that.
I was just thinking it would give
Yeah.
them a good reference just when they
Yeah, just
look at that to know what staff is there.
yeah, that's almost like a menu.
I
Yeah.
got a couple.
Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. Other requests I'd like to make is, because I'm happy that the council's meeting like this, and I sat in the back of the room, and I don't mind that. But I think it's probably time that we put an 8-foot table right here and added the other two people, so they're right here as part of the, and there's microphone hookups here, because I know I tripped over them when I sat here forever, that you can run the microphones. But I think it's time, because we'll probably keep doing this for a while, that you could just add an 8-foot table and 2 more council people could sit there, and then we would essentially all be at the dais. But if you could work on that, I think it's time.
I think that would be a 12-foot table, right?
Excuse me?
Would that be a 12-foot table?
Well, it's just that if you could make it with a 6, but one would be sitting, right there, and they could still turn and look at that screen. It's only gonna be, hopefully, for another 6 months. But, I could see, and you could move those tables maybe back if you had to. But the reason I said an 8 is one could sit here and one could sit 7 feet away or 6 feet away and still have room at the other end of the table, sort of like what we're doing here.
Right, but they'd have to be
whatever
6
it
feet from,
takes.
they'd have to be 6 feet from you, because presumably you'd be sitting
Well,
there,
no,
right?
but they're down and over, as you can imagine, if I was sitting here,
Okay,
see, because then, so on the table could fit up against here, so I think it could work, but I'm just saying maybe look at a different
Okay, I see what you're saying.
configuration, to try to get the council people kind of in this area. But I'm good with the way it is, and I'm good with sitting in the back again if I need to.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I agree with Tim too, but I got kind of 2 things. We're still on the COVID talk, right?
Yeah, we'll have a follow-up to this on item G11, but we're on G10 right
Oh, okay.
now. G10. And it may apply, Councilmember Peterkin.
Oh, okay,
to-
so it is the 10, yeah, that's,
Yeah, we're on G10.
so, yeah, I was thinking we got a couple $1 million if we need a little bit better of a camera or something. It's probably not a big deal, because they make them that can see pretty good. The other thing is on this, I just keep going back to this, the numbers you were talking about, 4 people and then 12 people out of 100,000, and I just typed it into my thing. So 1% of 100,000 is 1,000, and the borough's going on high level if it's 12 out of 100,000.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Peterkin. Yeah, it's going on high when it's a case rate of 10 out of 100,000, but that's daily case rate, so that's saying that 10 cases every day per 100,000 people. And that's what the governor's guidance and the district's guidance is based on, a case rate of 10 cases per day per 100,000.
Okay, so that's not all together, it's just people that pop up that day positive.
What, Councilmember Peterkin, what it's based on is the case rate is based on the last 14 days. So they add up the number of cases over the last 14 days, then they compare that to the population that subset was taken from, and then they convert it to how many that would be if your population was 100,000 per day.
All right, and we're not, that doesn't really affect anything in our city, right? It's just their thing.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think they actually have it down to the number in the community, if I'm not mistaken, the total number of people instead of as a ratio. So that's, I think, when we hit 52, that 51 or 52 or whatever it was recently, that pushed the school district in the Central Peninsula to virtual instead of in person, which they were planning on doing the hybrid to start the school year next week. Any additional discussion on item G10? See none.
I guess-
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Nexus.
Sorry, rolling back, I thought we were done with the regular part, so that's why I brought up this section. But I just wanted to thank Jamie for what she's going to do, and hopefully we can get the commissioners, back in if as appropriate, or educated as to the separation that we do have provided here. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on item G10? Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. I just wanted to give Councilman Naxted a hard time for bringing up this whole great. Just to show we've been distancing, but no, thank you.
Next, council will move to item G11, discussion. City of Kenai response to Governor Dunleavy's local mitigation level recommendations and consideration of joint work session with the City of Soldotna Council and brought forward by administration. Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. In your laydown packet, I've included the Ketchikan's COVID-19 community risk communication and also their dashboard. Just an example of what one community in Alaska is doing right now to track the cases within their community and provide information to the community. I think and there was a presentation that I sent out to council yesterday that I'd encourage you to take a look at, where the incident commander for their EOC actually goes over the plan in a Zoom meeting that I attended. This is, again, I think is a really good example of what a community can do as far as a mitigation plan goes. He was very clear when he described this to us that community engagement in this is really important. He also made it very clear that everything in their plan is strictly a recommendation, and they did that intentionally. They didn't want to get to a point where the government was going to be mandating anything. This was all about recommendations. He said, it's really about consistent, objective, and transparent information to the community so that they can make informed decisions. That's what it was all about. And I think there's a lot of value in that, because getting really good information is really hard for folks. But if a community is able to put together something like this where they can provide good, consistent, clear, and fact-based information for their citizens that they can trust, then they can go to that and see where things are trending. If your community is doing really well with a low number of COVID cases, or if things are progressing and maybe they should take a little more care in their day-to-day activities. That's the type of thing that I think a lot of people are looking for. I don't think people generally, certainly in our area, are looking for the government, either local or state, to be issuing mandates right now, or potentially at any point. But good information is really useful. If you look at the Ketchikan community risk communication, actually on the second page there, where it talks about the report, indicator, metric details. I found this really interesting, the way that they approached this. So they've got 10 different metrics that they measure there. And, you know, here locally, at least with the school district, as you know, they're measuring cases. If we get 52 cases over 14 days, then we hit red. What Ketchikan has done here is they've broken those cases down into community transmission, congregate or industry cases, and then the third one is travel cases. Their recognition was that if you have community transmission, that means one thing for your community. But if you maybe have a congregate housing unit that has an outbreak and have 10 or 12 cases, that probably doesn't put your community at any further risk because it's contained in that one location. Or if there is risk, it's certainly much less than if you had 12 community cases. So they broke it down further. They also included other measurements in here, like their healthcare system capacity, and that's something that Councilmember Glendenning's been talking about consistently. You know, what are we looking at as far as hospitalizations and available beds, those sorts of things? Those are other things that they're measuring. So rather than just taking this very simplistic approach that, okay, we're just going to look at the number of cases that we've got, they broke it down into the different metrics that they felt were really meaningful to determine whether or not they should recommend that their citizens react in a certain way. You know, maybe they should congregate less, or maybe they should wear masks in certain situations. So I really like the way that they provided a lot more detail and a lot more metrics that you can look at. And some of these metrics are leading indicators, meaning that when those start popping up, it probably means that cases are coming. And some of them are lagging indicators that are really the last thing that you see after you have a number of cases. Again, I think that it's really important that this is just recommendations as they've stated here in this document. When I talked to council about this at the last council meeting, I had suggested that we schedule a work session with the councils of City of Kenai and City of Soldotna, and council suggested that we make sure that we reach out to the borough to see if they can be involved in this process as well. We did have a follow-up meeting. Mayor Gabriel, Mayor Sprague, Stephanie Queen and I, and borough administration, including Charlie Pierce, James Baisden, and several of his staff met, and we discussed this in some detail. I had a follow-up phone call with Mayor Pierce, and we talked about it further. After that discussion, and Stephanie and I have talked multiple times over the last week, what I would suggest and hope that the council would support at this point is that the two administrations of Kenai and Soldotna, and hopefully with involvement of the borough administration as well, either through their EOC or the mayor's administration, we would work with the state's EPI team to actually put together the framework that's similar to what you see here. But along with that, we'd like to establish a stakeholder group that would include probably a member of each council and a member of the assembly and a member of the hospital and a member of public health and a member of the school district that we could check in on as we work through this process. We could put together the framework, check in with that stakeholder group, get back to work, go through those iterations several times until we had what we felt was a final product, and then we could take it out to the community, get their feedback, and then ultimately back to the legislative bodies. So really what we're asking is allow us to go to work to put this framework together, probably similar somewhat to Ketchikan's, but I think it's going to be unique because we're our own community. We're going to have different considerations, different things that we want to look at more than others, certainly than Ketchikan. The other element of this that is quite interesting is that I've been told by the state and public health multiple times over the course of the last 5 months that much of the information that Ketchikan is tracking is not information that they will provide. However, in the last meeting we had with Ann Zink, with Dr. Zink, and Joe McLaughlin, the head of epidemiology at the state, it appears that the state is now encouraging governments to make their own decisions, and to make those decisions, the local governments need that type of information. So it seems that they've switched now, that I'm relatively confident that they will provide that information that we need if we put together some sort of matrix like this. So that's the request is that you let us start to work on this and form a stakeholder group that we can engage with as needed as we work through that process.
And just to comment, thank you, Paul, that was very well captured there was, you always, I always think of Mr. Eubank when he always asks, why do we do things? What's the overarching why? And in this case, the governor has basically told us that he's going to defer to local authority with how to manage, COVID outbreaks, COVID numbers, mitigation, things like that. So that's the why in reaching out to the city of Soldotna. We have one hospital here in the Central Peninsula we all rely on. I think it's, my feeling at least, I think it's a better approach to have some uniformity with anything that you might do or propose to do. Now, at this point, there's not, and we don't want to panic anybody. There's not a panic going on, but this is the type of thing that can be dynamic. And I think it's important that we get ahead of it and have a plan, moving forward as we go into fall and winter here. We really don't know what's going to happen to case rates. As school kind of goes in, businesses have been open. So I fully support Paul's idea of having our administrations. I think it would be pretty cumbersome when we're trying to drag the body through the process. I feel comfortable in Paul and also Stephanie Queen over in Soldotna that they can sort of work the pseudo product that we can modify, amend as it comes to us, send back for maybe some tweaks, but certainly something that would probably be a more efficient, effective process to come up with that. Vice Mayor Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I support this idea too. You kind of answered one of my questions because it was going to be about the framework. I think a stakeholders group is a good idea and develop a framework, and then there would be a continuation of the public process, because it would go back to the councils and everything, and there could be more public input. And I assume the stakeholders meetings would probably be public meetings too, that they would be getting public input. Because I agree that information is important. I like the recommendation part of it. People need to know what recommendations are. And also, it's kind of like hodgepodge now. So this is something that could be on the city and the city and the borough website, kind of a portal or something to the data and what's happening and what the recommendations are. Because right now you have to look at different sources and some of them aren't trustworthy, or whatever. I think that would, I support the idea.
Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. Yeah, I wholeheartedly support moving forward. I was going to ask the question if Ketchikan hired a consultant and who that person was and whether they could assist us or whether they had somebody in-house, i.e. working with the state that created this. That would be one thing. The second thing is just when I talked last meeting also, it not only helps us in today's virus issue, but it has the potential to help us and have a game plan going forward, because that's the one thing that went wrong across the whole country is there really wasn't a plan. I have to applaud, even our citizens in Kenai and on the peninsula, when they shut everything down, there were people that said why and asked questions, but they did it. And, they did all the things they were supposed to. Then you open it back up, and then there's all these things again, and they say, what are you doing to us? So I was glad to hear the fact that we're not making any mandates, and I probably wouldn't vote for any mandates at this point. But having a plan and it being tested through this one and give us some models, and then if there is another pandemic, but I hope our country has learned a lesson that when a pandemic, wherever it might start, that they have a plan to shut that area down and not let it get out of hand across the country. There's an argument whether it's out of hand or not, but it's certainly worse than the yearly flu. But at the same time, I see this, and I would hope that whatever we come out of this with, that we make it part of a master plan that has to be revisited every 10 years and updated. In other words, if you had a second hospital or, whatever the case might be, that there's, so that you refine your plan, so if there's an issue that it needs to be used again, it's there on the shelf ready for the citizens, and we won't have to hopefully shut down. I liked what I heard about the idea that if you had a senior facility or long-term care facility in your community and all the cases were there and yet they were locked down, don't overreact to that till certain other triggers might play their hand. So I like what I'm hearing. I think it's proactive, and I think we're responding to the chaos that happened and say there's got to be a better way to manage this, and for us to help the state make decisions based in our area at least, by us having tools in place to say, wait a minute, we have a plan and it's working. So I'll leave it at that, but so I hope that we can go one step further. I don't know if you want to call on it by making it a plan on the shelf that not only after this one's done, but it works for the future. Thanks.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
what did,
At the very
Councilmember
beginning,
Navarre, did you have a question?
He questioned whether there was a consultant or not.
Oh, sorry,
And
yeah.
then there was the rest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
just-
you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Nexted, Councilmember Navarre. They did not hire a consultant. Their incident commander, the EOC, is a self-proclaimed data geek, and he put this whole thing together. Now, he put it together, but he also leaned very heavily on the state EPI team, including Dr. Zink and Joe McLaughlin, to make sure that they were putting something together that made sense. So he had some help, but there was no consultant.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Peterkin?
Yeah, I appreciate this. I like what I hear so far, but I just want to caution Paul and our council. I know everyone's probably thinking the same thing, but like Anchorage is a disaster right now with the runaway mayor making all these mandates and shutting down restaurants and doing things. And I'm fine with reporting, I'm fine with statistics, I'm fine with a plan, but I'm not fine at all with making masks mandatory or shutting down restaurants or anything that would be above and beyond what our state would do. And I just want to be really, really clear about that. And I've spoke with some other, not more than 3, but some other council members, and that feel the same. And I just want to be really clear that I like us being involved. I think that that's how you manage these kind of situations. But this is something that can easily get out of hand. If we get to red and then we tell everyone in our town they got to wear a mask, I'm out. Like, that's just not even an option. So anyway, that I'm good with the reporting and the plan and that.
Yeah, and I think where we end up here is through the process, we sort of determine what thresholds are important to do certain things. The idea is, it was easy before to sit back and wait for the state to react and statewide what was going to happen, and we would simply implement that. We had no choice. We could make the mandates tighter than what the state did. We never did. And there's each community has a different feeling about this. And I made this point. The city of Soldotna is still meeting by Zoom, I believe. Oh, they're not. They're in person now. I think the borough is. The borough's assembly is still meeting by Zoom. I know there's some members that are very anxious to start meeting in person, but we were one of the first bodies to come back to in-person meetings, and so I think we're a little bit. So each council has, each body assembly has their own take on this, but when you think back of, and I think there are some people that might think, oh my gosh, this is going to be some sort of lockdown. It's absolutely, I don't expect that's going to be that case. I think we're going to get to a point where we say, you know, what's accept, what levels, what are we working with? We have one hospital with a certain amount of capacity that we have to keep in mind. We don't, if everything goes along the way they are now, and I agree with you, I agree with Councilmember Glendenning. I made this point over and over. To me, I think hospitalizations is a more important number than positive cases, you know. But if that starts rolling up, then we need to have a plan to be prepared. The worst thing that can happen is, you know, our hospital gets overrun, and you know, we're sitting back going, well, what do we do? You know, so.
Yeah, if I can follow up
Yeah.
with that, is just, I'm even okay with recommending, just not mandating. Like we say, well, we're at a red and we recommend you wear a mask. But the second that it gets into, we're trying to enforce wearing a mask, and it's not just a mask. Never through this, what they call a pandemic, whatever, has any hospital has been overrun, and I don't think they're going to get overrun, but I think we should be still vigilant about it. But just as long as we're not mandating things, I'm good.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, I have a question for our city manager. Ketchikan, it's a unified borough, right? It's city and borough, one government?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, I don't think they are unified. I think that there's an assembly and a council in Ketchikan, so I don't think they're unified.
There's two clerks. It's a Ketchikan Gateway Borough and Kenai, or City of Ketchikan.
Okay, and then a second question, we have over at the borough, we have a Safety and Resiliency Commission. Would that be in their wheelhouse to consider something like this borough-wide? To enlist their, co-opt their input? It'd be more effective borough-wide, I think, than just 10,000 people out of 50,000 deciding what to do. Or are you thinking that we just want to have a set of policy, which is what we're going to be doing, set a policy just for Kenai and Soldotna?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, that, as far as I know, that resiliency group has not been assembled yet, or maybe they have, I'm not sure, but my understanding of their objective as a group is likely that's not in their wheelhouse. More likely, it would be the borough's EOC, which is the entity at Ketchikan that took this on. Ketchikan EOC, and the incident commander, and their group is the one that took this on. If you want to do it borough-wide, that would be the most likely location for this to start from. But as far as this effort, really what we're focused on is the Central Peninsula, because there's really two, and in the district has identified, three separate areas within the borough: east, south, and central. So we're talking about central, 37,000 people-ish, that this would be focused on. I do think that the involvement of the borough in this effort is really important, though, which is why we want to bring borough administration on as well. And again, whether or not that's Dan Nelson from their EOC or Bud Sexton from their EOC, or if it's the mayor or the chief of staff, one of those folks being engaged in this process, I think, is really important. So when we talk about the stakeholder group, which is the larger group, maybe 10 or 12 folks that the business community is represented in the assembly and the councils and the hospital and public health, the school district, the stakeholder group is the large group, but the folks that actually do the work would be Stephanie and I, and hopefully a representative from the borough to help to establish this framework, so then we can bring it to that stakeholder group for their consideration.
And then what would be the end game? Would be a regimen of strictures, or it would be guidance? How would that look different than what we're doing now?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. Really what it is about providing good information for folks so they can make an informed decision. Right now, if you ask someone, what is the number of community spread cases on the Central Peninsula, no one could tell you. If you ask them how many cases were in industry over the last 14 days, no one could tell you. That's not information that is readily available to the public. No one would be able to tell you how quickly we're able to conduct contact tracing on the Central Peninsula. This would potentially provide that as well. You know, contact tracing is really important. We all agree on that. If you can contact trace within 48 hours, 80% of the time, you're doing a really good job of contact tracing. But if you don't have enough contact tracers and suddenly it's taking you 72 hours or twice that to get your contact tracing completed, then there's potentially people out there that were in contact with a person that was positive that you don't get in touch with for 5 days or more while they're out circulating in the community. So that type of information that we just don't have right now is not readily available. We would provide that, and that allows people to make decisions based on good information. Anytime you want to make a decision, in personal or professional life, you always want to have the best information possible to make that decision. This would provide people, business owners, residents, anyone, with the information that they needed to make good decisions.
Yeah, delve in a little more to the contact tracing. This is something that hasn't been revealed yet. What is the function, what powers do they have, and how deeply can they get in our business?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. If you look at the Ketchikan sheet here on the second page again, the report indicator metric details, the bottom one there is, do we have adequate contact tracing? And the indicator is the percent of new contact investigations completed within 48 hours. And you can see there, if greater than 80% of those are happening within 48 hours, they consider that a success. They've got sufficient contact tracing and they're doing well. Contact tracing is happening right now across the state. There's contact tracers here locally at Kenai Public Health. Every time there's a positive case on the Kenai, they contact that individual and they try to figure out who their contacts were over the course of the 14 days prior so that they can notify those folks that they were potentially came in contact with someone who was COVID positive. So I can't speak to the process specifically that contact tracers go through, but it is an element of public health that they feel is critically important to making sure that they can notify folks who are potentially exposed to the virus.
Do we have public health powers? The cities,
city-
first-class home rule cities, no?
We do not.
Okay, so this is the contact tracers are a state element? Okay.
Excuse me, we do have public health
Yeah.
powers, but we're not, it depends on what you mean by that.
Right, under declaration, we do.
We don't currently employ any contact tracers, nor is that being contemplated.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I just, my experience, my first test, and I've come back clean. I just want to tell you that the state's doing a dang good job because both of my daughters were exposed, and this has been a month or so ago in Homer, and I got a call within 4 hours of when they were exposed, and the people couldn't give me names, but they were calling about 40 different little tracers that went off from who they knew every place each of my, because they were minors, where they'd went, everything. I was shocked and it was a lady from Anchorage, and she was at a command center in Fairbanks, and she was a registered nurse, and I was shocked what she told me. And I did exactly what they said, and let me tell you what, they, in my opinion, they were on top of it. And we quarantined both the girls. We had them tested like 3 times. They never, thank God, they didn't positive. Some of their friends did, but it was pretty impressive. The state actually has an amazing handle, at least in my experience, on contact tracing, and I just want to applaud them because I had no idea either, Jim, until that lady called me on the phone, and I was pretty shocked what they knew.
Councilmember Naxton.
I just kind of carrying on. I wanted to thank Mr. Ostrander for the link to the Ketchikan group which included AML and Dr. Zink and some others. I watched about 25 minutes of it, which suggested in your email would be very helpful, and it certainly helped prepare me for this meeting tonight and what we're discussing and what the Ketchikan basic program is. And it's not perfect, and we'll never know what perfect is, and we can always tweak things and whatnot. But I guess moving on is, I'm in support of, certainly working with the city of Soldotna and the borough, but also it's almost September. The more people you get involved in all of that, I just see kind of a bureaucratic quagmire potentially happening. We've talked about this for 30 minutes, which is good, but then you include Soldotna and then the borough and all of that, which is also good. And as it works out, it'll be December. I'm just saying, I don't know that, but perhaps you have a timeline in mind that this will actually happen, so it will be useful.
Mr. Ostrander?
In a timely fashion. Thanks.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, that's a good question. I have not established a timeline yet, but I would tell you that I think with some of the information that we've been provided, that Ketchikan has already gone through, we would make it a priority to try to move this as quickly as we could. And I do think that's why it's important to have a smaller working group, an administrative working group, to work through all of that, all the minutia before you get it out to a larger group, so that you do have a chance of getting it done in a timely manner. So I don't have a timeline for you. I just haven't thought that through yet, but we would try to expedite it as much as we possibly could.
And that's good, and I mean, when you get the feelers out there, I mean, it may be appropriate, for the city to get its own up, which is going to change, as the other groups kind of we work together or something like that. I'm assuming that the Ketchikan risk communication page would be something that we could borrow from them and make it our own, and then tweak it. And we could have something like that up in a week if we chose to. Is that pretty much correct?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, possibly, yeah, we could. It's I think there's some elements of what they're doing that we may not want to include, just based on the little bit of work I have done on this so far. There's also the question about the data and how we'd be receiving that, which, like I said, in my discussions with the state over the last 5 months, essentially said we're not going to share that with you. So we have to get over that hurdle as well. I mean, there's a way to get there. It's just, I'm not sure how much time it's going to take working with the state's EPI team to make sure we can get the data in a timely manner and be able to populate this table with it.
And from the financial side, I presume the COVID money is eligible to be spent for hiring a consultant or any of those things to develop this moving forward. Would that be accurate, Paul?
Yes, if we needed to, the COVID money, the federal guidance would allow us to use that for development of this.
Okay. Any further discussion on item G11? Councilmember Glendening?
Yeah, it just, I guess we're doing something. I don't know how it differs from the state, but to me, it's like, drinking out of a garden hose. Now, if this will simplify it, I see, a lot of crafts and whatnot. Where I'm at with it is I look and see who's in the hospital, who isn't. The school is very prominent. We have the 3 colors, so we know what the school is doing. But where I kind of started climbing off the train is I was watching MSNBC or something, and Dr. Fauci was up there, and he was recommending we all wear goggles too. And I said, that's a bridge too far, and so maybe it's comforting to have what you have offered here, but for me in my house, I'm done.
Well, again, I think we always kind of circle back to the why, and, since the governor ceded essentially local management, we can certainly not do anything. I don't know if that's appropriate.
Well,
Councilmember Navarro.
we're successful in what we're doing so far. washing our hands and the social distancing. And there's organizations and building big box stores that require masks. I saw someone being escorted out the other day by 3 people. They didn't have a mask on. So, there are policies and procedures in place. I just don't, and if there's COVID money to help with this, I'd hate to see a lot of staff time being applied to this, because we have other things going on too. I'll listen and learn, but
Well, I guess the analogy I would use, and maybe we're philosophically opposed here, is, if you never do fire-wise mitigation around your house because you haven't had a fire, the worst time to do it is when there's a fire bearing down on your house. So this is sort of the fire-wise component, in my opinion. We're not saying we're instituting mandates. We're just making a plan moving forward. That's where I'm at. Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I think we'll have more debate when we see the final plan and the different things. What I like about this is, just like you said, there's data. Councilmember Glendening said how many people are in the hospital. If we had this in place, we would have that information immediately. We could get an update, we could go to the website, our own website, that we get to have a say, and say, is that accurate? How's it being calculated? Here's how it's being calculated. We call this on the 7th day and the hospital responds to us, and whatever the case, and through the state and their data. But we could have, I assume, but at least for our area down here, our public is being informed. No mandates, no nothing, just information to them that tells them here's what's happening in your community, good, bad, or indifferent. And then it's, like I said, I think it's a lesson forward of how we handle it in the future and how other things happen, because we'll have gone through it and we'll have learned from the lessons, and we'll be ready with this right away to say, here's how many cases are in our community, here's what's happening, here's where, instead of the mix match that's been coming out. So I'm anxious to see. I think it's something the public will want, so long as they understand that this isn't a plan to put in mandates. This is a plan to get information to the public, and that so people can make a decision. And I was happy to hear that in Councilman Peterkin's case with his daughters, that it wasn't evasive, the check-in, and it's more of an information, say, hey, you might have been in contact. In most cases, I believe the state agreed to do a free test for you or whatever, and all of those things. But certainly if I was in contact and somebody and nobody told me, I wouldn't be, if they should tell me. If they know something and they just keep it quiet, they should get it to me as soon as possible so I can take whatever action and maybe protect some loved ones that I might be in contact with that are at risk, but I didn't know I was putting them at risk. And I might not have it, but I'd like to at least be told and have the opportunity. And I look forward to faster tests. I think our country's going to get better at that. I think the Harvard test, whatever, was saliva or whatever. But I'm hoping in the future things are much better for everybody. But I'm also, Paul, like Henry mentioned, I'm hoping we can do this sooner than later, whether there is a second wave, no matter what it looks like, no matter that we have this data available to our public that they can at least look at and go from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, and I do support you using staff time, for this project, and I'm happy to hear that there's maybe CARES COVID money that could help with reimbursement for that. I think this would also, I agree with Councilmember Navarre and Naxted about, sooner if possible. I think this will be a good resource for business too. It could be even temporary. It's not again, they're just recommendations. It's a good source to look to because it's this is a dynamic situation where there's peaks and valleys, there's waves, there's times of low risk and higher risk. So, protocols may change. A business may want to change its protocol on a temporary basis, for 2 weeks or something based on high-risk information, and then go back to lesser protocols, or something like that. Anyway, it'd be good for them to have the information as well as for the people that patronize them. Thank you.
Any further discussion on item G11?
I got something.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yeah, the more I think about it, I agree a lot with Jim, because I'm okay with going forward, but keeping this on a tight scope, because we're not gonna be coming up with we're just gathering everybody else's data and coming up with some kind of report, and we're not gonna be coming up with our own. We don't do that. That's what KSRM does and the state does and everyone else does. So I just don't want to see it consume us if it's just going to a few more meetings and keeping people updated, and I'll be interested to see it back, but I sure as heck don't, I'm surely gonna give my piece of not letting this get out of hand at all. So, as long as we keep it in some real tight guidelines.
Councilmember Navarre?
Just real quick, I want to get done so we move on, but the discussion point says a joint work section. If I understood the city manager correctly, the directive that everybody's been talking about here that the city manager put forward is to just put the small group together and formulate this Central Peninsula plan and data, and then it will come back to each council individually or assembly if the borough's involved, just so I can get a clarification as to what directive we're given, or what the city manager thinks our directive is at this point.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gable. Councilmember Navarre. So what I think the directive is that there will be an administrative team of probably 3, maybe 4 people that will work on putting this structure together. Along with that, I think forming a stakeholder group that includes some people outside of the cities, such as the hospital and public health and the district, and those, to check in with them as we formulate this. And it potentially isn't even in a meeting format. It could just be a group that we're emailing updates to and asking for their input as we go through the process. But it'd be that administrative team working on putting this together, checking in with the stakeholder group as needed, and then bringing it back to the councils. And that could be at a joint work session, potentially, with both councils and the assembly, or it could be the individual councils themselves.
Okay. I think we're all kind of all right in here, or at least the majority of us are. So, got the thumbs up there, Paul. Any other discussion on item G11? Seeing none, we'll move to commission committee reports, Council on Aging.
Yes, the Council on Aging did meet on August the 13th, and the senior center director put really good bullet points in her report. What I'd highlight off of that is the building and maintenance project are being completed while the center is empty, and there's a phone buddy program being developed. A lot of the folks there are shut in, and perhaps because of their situation, they cannot or are unable to have visitors, and so it's a pretty lonely existence. But what they did reveal is that a phase 1 protocol to open the facility, what would it look like? And they're going to work hand in glove with Paul on that. At some point in time, we will be back to normal, and they're just going to be proactive, and no timeline, no strictures, just starting to think about what would it look like to get the senior center open again. the comments I heard, it was a Zoom meeting, but they want to get out and play. They're anxious they're a social group, and they definitely want to be social. They just recognize the challenges associated with that. And the seniors, they're very grateful for the care and attention that they're being given, and they appreciate the ability to have the input through their Council on Aging meeting. They also noted that the Meals on Wheels program is dynamic. Just how the meals are being distributed, not only throughout the community but available at the center for seniors. There's some meals that can be distributed that perhaps can be shelf stable for a while, so you can deliver more than one at a time, and individuals can have them at home. And they also noted that there's a little change in their vehicle fleet. In that some vehicles have outlived their usefulness. So what they've arranged for and what's going to happen is transport, for example, for medical appointments. They have an arrangement with the cab company. And of course, they have the handicapped vehicle if necessary. And I think that's it. The money that's been appropriated and distributed to them, we're aware of that through our agendas and whatnot. And the next meeting is scheduled for September 10th. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Glendenning. Airport Commission?
Thank you. The Airport Commission had a meeting on August 13th. I don't know, Henry, were you listening in? I missed it, but they only had 3 items on their agenda. 2 of them were the items we took care of today with Soars and Schillings on the extension. And the only other one is a new 45-year lease to Alaska Air Fuels. And I'm not sure how their recommendation came through on that, but I didn't see it coming up on our agenda, whether it'll be added by next meeting or not. I don't know, but otherwise, I believe that has to come back before the council. And their next meeting is September 10th. Thanks.
Thank you. Harbor Commission?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel, and council. So we met in person here on August 10th, and we've actually been meeting here. It's been going quite well. We space out good. Mr. Curtin gave us some, in his report, we did well on the PU fishery. Looks like we had about a 20% increase from last year, and probably got some more reports on that coming. And everything went well. We saved some money on, we had some competitors in the trash business and saved some money on things that were good that he reported on, and that all went well. The bathroom projects are all moving forward, the vault bathrooms, everything's been bid out, and looks like we're moving forward on that. The dock repair was not easy for Scott. He bid it out, didn't get any bids, bid it out again, and finally found somebody that'll fix our dock, and quite a bit of money, but we're gonna get it done. So we're just moving forward. We talked a lot about the safety of we had a lot of incidents, not a lot, but a fair amount of incidents this year on the river. We had a couple people end up in the water and some boats crashing into each other, and so we're constantly talking about on the Harbor Commission how we can be fixing that, not fixing it, but trying to make it as easy as possible. And then I have to ask Jamie, we changed our meeting date. I don't remember what we changed it to something. So we're meeting again here, I believe, in a month. So thank you.
Thank you. Parks and Recreation Commission?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Parks and Recreation Commission met on August 6th. They had a discussion of the Kenai River Marathon, which is going to be September 27. They talked about changes in protocols, which are going to include cancellation of the spaghetti feed, staggered starts of the race, and some changes on water, how water stations are operating, all related to, protocols for mitigation of any virus concerns. They also had a discussion of the future in-person or virtual meetings, which is related to our earlier discussion, and they ratified having a hybrid meeting, so they still want to have some people be able to participate by Zoom, if they want to. During that meeting, I did notice, and I hadn't, understood that before either, that the people that were remotely participating by Zoom couldn't see anybody that was at the meeting. Didn't seem to be a big concern among those commissioners. I'm sure that, the clerk can come up with, and they would be open to any type of improvements or whatever there might be for that. My only concern regarding to that really has to do with Planning and Zoning Commission, because they make decisions. I think it would be good if they have people participating by Zoom, that those people be able to see, who's at the meeting and everything. And so, as Councilmember Peterkin said, I don't know, maybe there's something in the budget that we could do for, if not going off budget, or if it isn't a significant expense regarding camera, so that might be something to look at. Or certainly maybe if it is a bigger expense, something that we could look at for next budget year or something like that. But thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy. Planning and Zoning Commission?
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission had both a meeting and a work session on August 12th. And they had a consideration of a plat, reapproving of the preliminary plat of Beaver Loop Acres, Edition Number 2. The commission had, if I recall, about 11 recommendations, changes to that plat when they reviewed it the first time, and they wanted it to come back. So it came back to the commission, and they accepted those changes. So that went back to the borough. Then the next three items are all very much related. They had a public hearing, Resolution PZ 2020-22. It was an application for a variance permit for a building in excess of 5,000 square feet. And the building specifically is the Elder Building for the Kenaitze tribe. And there's already a variance permit because the building exceeds 5,000 feet already, that was. But what they were wanting to do is add on some additional kitchen area and I think some dining area. And it wasn't a lot of area, but again, it exceeds even more over the 5,000 square feet. So they discussed that. There were folks here from the Kenaitze tribe that also explained what they were trying to do. And that was approved. The next two items were resolutions under new business related to that. An application for review of a development in the townsite historical zone for that property on 1,000 Mission Avenue, and that was also approved. And then, just for complete consistency, they did another resolution. An application for amendment to the conditional use permit. The first time when the Elder Building was being built, that it was going to be over, that it was consistent with that. Probably didn't absolutely need to be done, but I think it was a good idea. It just kind of takes care of the whole thing. So they'll be working on that, and hopefully before the end of the year, that addition will be done. A lot of things happening in Old Town. Then the last item they had was related to what Mr. DeVara was talking about. They had a recommendation of the City Council for an application for a 45-year lease of city-owned land within the airport reserve to Alaska Airfuel, Inc. This particular lot is the northernmost subdivided lot along the ramp, the extended ramp to the north of the tower. And the commission spent probably over half their meeting actually discussing this particular lease application. Not that the lease itself was a problem, the building and everything, it all meets airport standard, for a lease, but they didn't need the entire property, so there was a remnant strip, essentially about 100 feet wide by 400 feet, 300 and something long. And what they had was, it would be on the south side, but I think it might be actually on the north side. But the concern was, with the commission, was whether or not that remnant piece of property would be sufficient all by itself as a commercial lot for aviation. And a lot of debate. I did suggest that perhaps, it was going to go to the airport the next evening, and then that they would perhaps discuss that. So, at any rate, I think the airport commission did approve recommend the lease, but that'll be coming back to us. And I know Mr. Ostrander is looking at that particular, going beyond here a little bit, that little strip where it is situated. It's adjacent to a much larger piece of airport property. So, I mean, there's a piece there could be actually added on to that perhaps. So that'll be something that'll be coming back to us in the future. I did promise the Planning and Zoning Commission that since they were uncomfortable with that lease and with that I would make a big point of it here and whatnot, and that it would be considered and dealt with appropriately. So I think I've done that. And to move on, then they had a work session afterwards, and the work session was regarding a proposed ordinance that basically will modify and change the borough subdivision ordinance, and that naturally will affect the city in some ways. So it was just pretty much an overview of all those changes. Some of them are not a big deal. Some of them probably require a little more consideration. There's words that are changed in there from may to shall, which impact the city. So some things, they're going to have another work session over it, so I'm not going to get into all those details. So their next regular meeting will be August 26th, and they'll have a meeting and then a work session to go over this some more right afterwards. So if you're interested, pull up the packet. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Nakstad. Next up, we have Beautification Committee, which was Councilmember Petty.
If I could, I'll just I know the next meeting is September 8th.
Yes.
And the beautification, as you know, take the summer off, so this will be their first meeting in about 3 months. I think May was the last one, and I know I used to be on the beautification. So they normally go around and look at positives and what they can do better. So September 8th.
And they did tour the, she did recommend that everybody tours the, our beds, flower beds, around town.
Okay.
They're coming in very well, and, I noticed Field of Flowers is starting to sprout up too. It always kind of takes off this time of year, so probably a little more rain, which we're supposed to be getting next week, will really, really light that off. And as Councilmember Navarre pointed out, their next meeting is September 8th. Under mini grant steering committee, there's no report. On the report of the mayor, I did attend Representative Knopf's memorial service, and then in addition to that, after that was over, went over and attended the celebration of life that the Hutchings graciously put on over at the auto spa there, and I did deliver, just so as council's aware, some of you may know or may not, but I did deliver a proclamation at the celebration of life declaring or proclaiming rather August 8th, 2020 as Gary Knopf Day. So that was good. It was very well received, and Helen, his wife, was very appreciative of that. So I want to thank the clerk's office for helping me put that together. Other than that, as Paul mentioned earlier, I did attend the Zoom meeting with the city of Soldotna and the borough mayor to sort of get this thing gelled and set, maybe get a direction, or at least get it moving in a direction. I want to thank Paul for his proactive efforts to engage the city of Soldotna and also the mayor. So I think we'll have a work product that everybody can live with at some point. Other than that, I don't really have a lot to report. We just, just ask everybody to, as Councilmember Glendenning said, keep continuing. That was another thing that came out of that meeting was one of the things we wanted to do is come up with a common messaging from each entity, us and the city of Soldotna and the borough. So we're working on a joint resolution that would essentially ask people to continue to, practice good hygiene, to do things that mitigation measures, socially responsible things that will probably, hopefully prevent us from seeing an increase in cases and things like that. So with that, I will turn it over to administration report, city manager, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'd like to point out to council that in the city manager's report in your packet, there's an update on the 202 Evergreen project, the Spur Motel, as requested by council, so that's there if anyone has questions on that. In addition, the 4th annual Kenai Silver Salmon Derby is happening this year, September 15th to the 20th. The sponsorships this year are up. Three Bears and Sportsman's are going to sell their tickets. Weigh-in is going to be at Three Bears again. We're going to have a much larger overall prize this year, we hope, so that at the beginning we're going to be able to advertise that prize to get increased participation. And we're also hoping to engage the guide industry this year, which in the past they really haven't participated much, but we hope to engage them more this year. On August 11th, I attended the special assembly meeting that was considering the payment from the borough to the cities with their CARES Act funding. That went well, and I had an opportunity to thank the mayor and his staff and also President Cooper for their help for the cities. On the 13th, we had a post-DIPNet meeting. Season went well. We may make some small changes next year based on what we saw this year. There's a possibility we might put a third shack on North Beach. Participation there was significantly up over what it's been the last 3 years. We're thinking that a third shack will improve the experience for participants significantly and make it much easier for our staff as well. There is also a possibility we might add one more seasonal person at the dock. What this would do is offset the time that our permanent staff is spending down there. We budget a certain amount of time for our staff to work down there, so rather than having them utilize their time down at the dock, have the seasonal staff handle more of that so they can go out and do the stuff that they should be doing rather than taking care of the dock. The cashless system that we put in this year was excellent. Went extremely well, very few complaints, saved significant time of our city staff, primarily Terry's staff, that had to account for all that cash every single morning of the fishery. So that was a good move for us. I met with Boys and Girls Club earlier this week, and they're interested in utilizing the top floor of the Beacon facility on a temporary basis. What that will allow them to do is increase their capacity for childcare by 40, which is significant, particularly now that the school district has shut down. All of the facilities that they would normally occupy that are in school facilities are now been forced to close. So they're looking for an alternative site. Childcare is a significant concern for the folks in our community that are working, particularly with schools closed. So this will increase their capacity significantly. We'll bring something to council at your next meeting and the recommendation will be to offer it them on a temporary basis for $1 a year. If, as we move through this public health emergency, we get to the other side and they find a lot of value in there, at that point they might consider actually entering into a longer-term lease agreement with the city at some amount of fair market value or some value for the city to lease that property to the Boys and Girls Club. Terry Eubank has actually been working with the local schools here in the city. They have issues now, assuming they get back into session, where because of the mitigation requirements, they have to increase the number of lunch hours they have by double. So Kenai Middle School, for example, normally has 3 periods where the kids eat. Because of mitigation protocols, they'd have to increase that to 6. So you'd have kids eating at 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and really is not a very good situation. So there's interest at the schools to actually have tents that they can put outside with tables inside of them so that they can still space the kids out, but get them just for the 3 lunch hours. So we are considering, we're waiting for the request from the schools, but we're considering the purchase of tents, large carnival-like tents that you can put outside the schools, along with picnic tables underneath those tents, using CARES Act money to help them have a much more manageable lunch hour at the school than what they would otherwise. The auction starts Saturday. This is really the beginning of the reduction of our fleet that you're aware of through our fleet replacement plan that Terry worked on during the last budget cycle. So we are selling a significant number of vehicles in this auction, plus a variety of other things as well. But it's exciting to see some of these fleet items being surplused, and then that's going to provide us the opportunity to get newer and better equipment there for our staff. I covered the bluff earlier when we talked about the pet agreement. And the last item that I want to mention is actually a sad note for me personally. Elizabeth Appleby is resigning from the city. Her last day is going to be September 3rd. She loved working here, really enjoyed her time here, but she has a job now in Anchorage, and Anchorage is really, they just got their tentacles in her, and that's really where she wants to be. So she's going to be moving to Anchorage. You know, and it was great getting to know Elizabeth and working with Elizabeth over the last 2 years, and she'll be missed. Her workload will essentially fall on Mr. Bloom's shoulders and mine over the next 3 or 4 months as we transition into the next position. So that's not going to be a lot of fun, but we're going to move as quickly as we can on that recruitment and get someone good here in Elizabeth's place. So that's all I've got, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions of the city manager? Councilmember Glendenning?
No, just thanks for your attention to detail and the idea of over at the Beacon Building providing at least a temporary place for those activities to take place. I think would be most welcome to the community, because children have to have daycare if the parents are working, and it'll really help the folks. And sorry that the announcement of Elizabeth. I know if I had half her brain, I'd throw mine away. That girl was really bright and engaged and thorough, and in the few little projects I was involved with her on her, I enjoyed working with her and learned a lot. And just thanks for the Public Works capital projects photos. That really helps me understand and visualize what has been said and what I think I know, and I can be assured, as I am anyway, that all is well, and I can go worry about other things. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Navarro?
Thank you. I would just like you, I think I speak for the full council, that you should not accept her resignation, to let her know how much we value her. Thank you.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I guess 2 things. I'm like the idea of the Boys and Girls Club utilizing our space. I think if we're not using it, it's so important to people that work and have kids that we can just somehow help that at little to no cost. I'm not at all in favor of the tents, just so you know, off the top of my head, and I'm not sure how that would work when it comes December, but as it gets cold out here and we have snow. But anyway, we'll be interested to hear how that progresses.
Any other questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we'll move to City Attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Members of council, I have no report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city attorney? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bloom. We'll move to the city clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I reported earlier that, or by email, that we have 3 candidates for seats. Councilmember Navarre and Councilmember Naxet are running again, and Tia Winger has also thrown her name in. And from our perspective, my perspective, the election went, the primary election yesterday went well. I think there was a lot of information. We were pushing out a lot of information to make sure that people knew where polling places had maybe changed to, and provide information to voters what their options were. I think there, unfortunately, was still a lot of misinformation circulating around, and the state has a significant number of absentee ballots to pour through, and they do review the in-person voting before they start looking at the absentee voting numbers, but I don't think I have anything else to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have a number on what the participation rate was, or just just off the top of your hand, was it sort of average, or?
The election workers were impressed with the numbers. I
Okay.
think that turnout was higher than normal for a primary, and if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I was trying. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, just kudos for a well-run election. And for the first time in a long time, I took advantage of the early voting. And there was room. I mean, it was kind of crowded, but there's plenty of room in here for people to do the social distancing. And just my poll is that we had good participation in the meeting. And I think there was good publicity for the absentee by mail feature of it, and I think that'll help us understand where we're going in the future, is how we handle our elections. So thank you for your efforts.
Yeah, I took advantage of the early voting too, which I've been doing the last couple of years, but yeah, it was great. I think I was in here and one other person came in right after I was here, and pretty much in and out, lickety split, and yeah, it's very good. And appreciate, I guess I did take this time to say I appreciate the folks that do come in here and work that early voting. I know there can be some long dry spells, so you take someone who hopefully likes to read or keep occupied. So, any other questions of the city clerk? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to additional public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to address the council at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to council comments. Let's start with Mr. Peterkin in the back there.
Yeah, good to see everybody. Sorry I missed the last meeting. I was taking my daughter to college, but glad to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Navarre.
Thank you. I too attended the celebration of life for Representative Gary Knopp, and I think the community, under the COVID rules and everything, gave him a good send-off, and I also attended Greg Bell's service just because they're both local people and we all knew him, and he had a great send-off too, and I was glad to see that. I forgot to write myself a note, but I knew I had one other thing, but what's that?
The AML board meeting?
AML board
The
meeting?
municipal league board meeting?
Yes, I did attend the AML board meeting, and that's probably one of the things I should give an update on. They actually had their summer conference by virtual, and if those of you should have all gotten the information or been able to sign up, it appears that the November conference, or more than appears, at this point we're going virtual with that also. And some of the things that happen in the summer one, which I know will be part of the normal conference, or the annual conference, will be the opportunity to do a Zoom with Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan and Representative Young, communicating to us about different issues that are happening on the national level. And then at the state level, the different representatives and senators. Certainly at that point, the election will have just happened because but we'll also have opportunities where you can just tie in both for educational type opportunities. So you might not be able to participate like when you're there for the whole day. The cost will be less, but you will be able to, if your interest is in harbors and what's happening and what are different forums, you'll be able to tie into that one or whatever. I believe all the affiliates, like the attorneys and the clerks and all them, are also going to have virtual meetings, but so they keep up with their training and different things. One of the things I think we'll miss somewhat is our planning and zoning commissioners, being able to really do it. But like I said, they're still putting the final touches, but they hope to have different opportunities even there if it opened up. This year was the first year we were going to, I believe it was this year, Jamie, you can tell me, but we were going to move some of the affiliates till off the beginning. We'd never got to get that, so, but maybe you could give them an update on that, because I think it maybe was going to go into effect in 2021 anyway, and so now it really will, because we're not going to have that. But anyway, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer. It was, AML's in pretty good shape. They did appreciate our funding and different funding for the COVID. Funding from different municipalities around the state. The sales tax is actually, they haven't been able to pay back the $100,000 that AML put up front to get everything going, but everything's moving along, and actually more municipalities are joining and wanting AML to collect sales tax on their behalf and continue to administer. There's been some shuffling. Those of you that knew Betty Betty retired and moved on, and so they're restructuring some aspects of their operation that way, but everything's in pretty good shape, and Nils continues to just amaze me with the type of job he's doing, and it just shows by the information he's getting out on this COVID funding for municipalities, and even as new updates are happening, communicating with our federal delegation and the state as to adjustments that need to happen so that those communities can better utilize their funds. And so, anyway, I'm sure Jamie will send you out information at the appropriate time to sign up, but I hope everybody still comes, even if you can't participate 100% in all the meetings. I think that'll be an exception that we should make if there is one, where normally if you go to AML, you're at the meetings, you do attend. This one will be a little different when it's done virtually, and just because you sign up, there'll be constraints because you're not taking yourself out of your daily lives here and moving yourself to a location where you participate. But anyway, with that, I'll end my comments for tonight. And Jamie, did you want to just say anything, or just to brief them on clerks and what you might have planned?
Sure, the clerks actually canceled their conference. We do all of the planning for our conference in March and April and are doing the finalization in August. And so since all of the clerks who do a lot of the planning for education were serving as PIOs and other capacities for their communities, and then right into elections and needing to make alternate arrangements for elections, we ultimately just canceled our conference, but I think everybody else is meeting virtually for all the other affiliates.
But that doesn't change affect your status of moving into as president of the Clerks Association, does it?
Amongst the executive board, we have joked that maybe Melissa could just go ahead and serve another year, and I told her that I would go ahead and make that motion.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I too am looking forward to when we can put most of this behind and get back to regular order. It seems like we're more functional and maybe not as crisp, but we seem to get more done and definitely leave with an understanding of what we've done and what we intended to do. I went to the market in Old Town, and it seems to be well attended, and there's a few places I stop and enjoy myself. I always get maybe a brat or a reindeer dog or something like that, and I enjoy the music, and it's just a good time to pause and enjoy. I appreciate in our packet too just the little section on the Kenai Historical Society. I'm kind of a history buff, and I eagerly read just what has gone on here 100 years ago, and how this area was viewed, and just insight into life and existence here on the Kenai Peninsula. And then once again, I'll just say that I don't do well in these situations, but I do miss my friend Gary, and with that, I'll close and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just want to congratulate Councilmember Navarre and Councilmember Naxted and Tia Winger for being certified to be candidates for our municipal election October 6th, and appreciate you all, going forward to be in front of the voters for public service on the city council. Congratulate you for doing that, and thank you for doing it.
Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you. Couple of things. One of the things that I frequently do in the public when I'm talking about the city and the people that work here is I refer to you guys as the A-team, and others that aren't here. And I mean that. And it's like, this is where these people came from. This is what they're doing. Our finances, our buildings, our from the top down, the city manager and the clerk's office and the attorney. So anyway, Elizabeth is certainly part of that team, part of what makes the city what it is, and it's good for her that she's moving on. Bad for us, and hopefully we can find somebody that keeps us at that A-team level, in that department. And I do believe that it does fall upon your shoulders, Paul. You turn into the planner when she leaves, so there'll be lots of motivation to see who we can find out there. And so hopefully that won't be too painful a process. It's going to be hard to replace her. But on we go. And I guess the last thing is I do wish Mr. Navarre and Ms. Winger good luck on the elections. They'll certainly be ramping up soon. So I'll be out there and I'll do the best I can. I'm not sure exactly how it's all going to look like with this COVID thing. I contemplated that. Do you walk up to somebody's door with your mask and you walk back 10 spaces and like you're, or just not do that. So I'm not sure exactly how everything's going to look, but it'll be, everybody will be under the same situation. So on we go. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Nexon. Yeah, and I do appreciate the Kenai Historical Society information in there. There's little tidbits of little happenings around our area back over 100 years ago, and you know, the theme here, this packet seems to be agriculture on the peninsula. It's kind of interesting how that you know, grew its roots, no pun intended, here. So, and then again, wish Miss Appleby the best of luck with her new adventure moving forward, and I'm certainly grown fond of her. She's been a really great member of your team, and so, yeah, bittersweet. Glad for her that she's moving on, but sad we're gonna certainly miss her. And with that, we'll move to executive session. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. In addition to the city clerk, is there someone that you would want to be available to attend?
Not that I was running that through my mind. I don't think so.
Okay. Then I would move to convene the City Council of the City of Kenai into executive session for review and discussion of the terms of an employment agreement extension for the city clerk, which pursuant to AS 4462-310C2 may be a subject that tends to prejudice the reputation and character of the city clerk, and per AS 4462-310C1 is a matter of which the immediate knowledge may have an adverse effect upon the finances of the city, and request that the city clerk be available to attend.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion to convene into executive session?
I have a question.
Councilmember Nexon.
Would it be appropriate to have Mr. Bloom stand by just in case if there's something in the contract document? I'm not sure if that's needed.
If you know, you and the mayor would like that to happen.
Yeah, I
we
mean,
could ask.
maybe as available, I suppose.
Right. And then, so if the city attorney would be available on a standby basis if needed?
Yeah, that'd be fine. I
Okay.
guess it would be worth having, but just in.
I think
in
the city manager should probably be available too.
Yeah, yeah, now you're pushing us.
But let's let the finance director.
Maybe we should have the finance director too.
Yeah, that's the other one I was thinking of. All the people here, maybe it would be Terry, but yeah, I tried to get you out to, I tried, Scott, sorry. Yeah,
Are we okay with just the lawyer?
yeah, I think, Mr. Plum, yeah.
All right.
Is there any, was there concurrence of the second on the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion to convene? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Nextet,
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Navar,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.